This is a recap for Tuesday, November 17th. What we did today was work on Cami Week 9. And I want to put in some color right here for these squares when we're thinking about multiplying positive times a positive. I can use green for positive. So positive times a positive is going to have a positive answer. And a negative times a negative is also going to have a positive answer, which we stopped at this point and discussed what we learned back when we added and subtracted integers. So I want to draw something just as a reminder. Back when we added integers, we had this picture right here. So a positive amount, and then if we add another positive amount, then we add them together and we kind of smush them together into even more negative. And that's how we would say it, that if we had a negative plus more negative, it would be even more negative. So for example, negative 3 plus negative 5 would smush together to negative 8. So notice here that we have a negative, and the answer is negative, and that seems to be different than this. And it's because of this symbol right here, which is multiplication. So this is about the size of the number, and here it's about the sign of the number. So it doesn't matter the size of the number, it just matters the sign. We could have the smallest little negative number, and if we multiply it by a positive number, it makes the product negative. So it is unlike adding in that way. So I'll go back to marking this if this is negative or positive, and we multiply by a negative, then we get a negative answer. If we start with a negative and multiply by positive, still negative. So any amount of negative in a multiplication problem will result in a negative product. Then we talked about that 5, we can think of it as 5 groups of 4. So if I start right here at 0, and I count out 5 groups of, negative 4, then I can go negative 4, negative 8, negative 12, negative 16. I think I'm off by one. I'm going to count these carefully. This is negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is negative 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is negative 12, 1, 2, 3. Here it is right there. That's negative 16. And we go one more group of negative 4 to get to negative 20. So there are my groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 groups of negative 4 to get to an answer of negative 20. We discussed that the number line is useful for some people and it confuses some people, and that's okay. It's not a tool that is, we don't need to all understand all the tools, but the more we can try to understand different tools, the deeper understanding we have of mathematics. I'm going to zoom in here because I'm going to take my highlighter and highlight just this leading negative and rename it as the opposite. So I want to think of that as the opposite. And there was a very cheesy video that we watched yesterday, and the girl had a trick where she had a negative 4 on her hands, and then she had this negative 4, and then she magically separated so it was negative 1 times 4. We can pull away the negative. We can separate that out. So I'm going to think of it as the opposite. So the opposite of 2 groups of negative 3. So if I start here in the middle at 0, and I'm going to make now two groups of -3. There's one group of -3. There's a second group of -3, up to -6. So two groups of -3 is equal to -6. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I want to do the opposite. So we're going to take this, temporarily separate it, and then put it back in at the end and just go to the answer, which is the opposite of -6. So that's why this answer is 6. So we did just a few more number lines. I'll just do them fairly quickly here. Two groups of 3. There's one group of 3, two groups of 3. I'm at 6. I'm going to temporarily just see that as the opposite of 4 groups of 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of 1. And then I use that part of it and go to the opposite. It's kind of like instructions for how to get on the number line. So that's -4. This is going to be the opposite of two groups of -4. There's one group of -4, a second group of -4. I get to -8. Then we're going to do the opposite of that. So that's going to take us all the way up to 8. We did number 4 through 12. And what I did was I marked positive first. So anywhere where the answer was going to be positive, I just put that in. So that's going to be positive. That way I can just come back through and do the multiplication and not even think about the sign of the answer. And so these are going to end up with a negative answer, because they all just have one negative that's being multiplied. So this is 10, 4, -18, 20, -33, -24, 60, 8, and -32. And then you can finish those last few problems off. They'll be in Thursday's recap if you want to come back and check. We did this problem. Josh lost 2 pounds, so I'm going to put that right there in the equation. Every week for 6 weeks. So this is 6 positive weeks. There was a reference to this problem in the cheesy video from yesterday, where the mom said that she had lost 3 pounds for 5 weeks, and the daughter said, so 5 weeks ago you were 15 pounds heavier, and got in trouble. So what integer represents the change in Josh's weight during that time? So this is 6 weeks times -2 is equal to -12. I guess just to be consistent, we can do that. And then we drew a picture on this one. So I'm going to solve this one, and then I'm also going to draw a picture. Jake is making iced tea. His ice cubes, which he uses to cool. He has ice cubes, which he uses to cool the iced tea. Each ice cube lowers. I'm going to use my red for lowering the liquid by 3 degrees. So that's going to be right here. He adds 4 ice cubes to the tea. So it's interesting that we use multiplication even though it says adds. We could do this. We could do -3 plus -3. So this would be a little bit more like how it's worded, but we know that if we're adding a bunch of the same thing, that that's really just multiplication. So that's 4 times a -3 is -12. So here's what the picture might look like. We might have this drink of iced tea. So we'll just put some iced tea in here. And then I'll put some ice cubes in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then maybe on each of these ice cubes, I'll just put that each of them drops the temperature 3 degrees. And people had different ways that they drew that. And then in some classes, people shared their drawings. And that is as far as we got. We're going to work on this tomorrow. But if you happen to want to work ahead on this, the rules for division are exactly the same as the rules for multiplication. And so it's going to look very similar. Last thing I want to do is just go to this presentation and just make sure that you understand, even though this says this is due, we're not going to finish this up until tomorrow. So this is as far as we got if you in the Pear Deck. And if you want to color just for fun, you can. And then tomorrow we will be watching this video on exponents. So that is a recap for Tuesday, November 17th.